I'm Jimmy Lee's father, Jimmy J. Lee, the Ole Miss student that's been missing. I'm calling and reaching out to anyone that could have any information to help in his return.
On the morning of July 8, 2022, Jimmy J. Lee stepped out of his apartment in Oxford, Mississippi, dressed in a silver robe, gold cap, and gray slippers. The 20-year-old graduate student was known for his infectious energy, his confidence, and his deep connections with friends and family.
He's real sweet. He don't bother anybody. He's real energetic, like real nice, friendly. He'll talk to anybody. He's kind of the life of the party. Like, he's real sweet. So it's just unfortunate like something like this is happening.
But on this day, he would never return home.
He was such a sweet individual. He is a very sweet individual. He was always outgoing, and the reason we're doing this tonight is because if it was any one of us, he would be here right now. We're looking for you, man. We're gonna find you, and we all really miss you.
Hours turned into days. Jay's phone went silent. His car was found abandoned, his beloved dog Lexus left behind, and his bank cards untouched. Where was Jay? And more importantly, what happened to him? As investigators retraced his last steps, a chilling truth began to unfold. A midnight rendezvous, a cryptic conversation, a hidden relationship. Jay had agreed to meet someone, a man whose identity he had kept secret, a man who, just before Jay arrived at his home, had searched online. How long does it take to strangle someone? What started as a missing persons case soon became a sinister puzzle of deception.
Do you have a motive? Do you have, what kind of proof is there from friends and family this person is missing? How do you know this person isn't missing? How do you know they don't want to be found? What proof is there that this person's even deceased?
Desperation and a secret someone was willing to kill for.
Jay's death is in the silence. No more financial transactions. No more social media posts. No more contacts with his mother, not checking up on her, not on her birthday. No more contact with his dogs. No more anything. The plans for grad school to you, the dreams, all proof that Jay is no longer with us. In that proof, that is how we know that we must seek justice.
But without a body, could the police prove murder?
These cases are unusual but not impossible. You let your imagination run wild. There are many different ways that the state can still prove that somebody is dead, even though they can't produce a body.
And would justice ever be served?
As a legal system, as our police department indicated that they will not take care of our community. They do not care if we die, if our bodies go unfound for 150 days. We cannot feel safe raising families in this community, existing in this community, knowing that our basic civil services do not protect us and do not regard us as equals with other human life.
A young man whose vibrant life was cut short by someone who had everything to lose.
If anyone knows anything or sees anything, say something. Contact the law enforcement. Just tell them what you know. This is my plea that you help find my child. Thank you.
This is the story of Jimmy J. Lee. To understand why Jay's disappearance sent shockwaves through his community, it is important to know who he was. At just 20 years old, he had already accomplished more than many do in a lifetime. He was openly gay in the Deep South, a place where being true to oneself could still come with dangers. Yet Jay never let fear dictate his life. He was deeply involved in LGBTQ+ advocacy, making it his mission to uplift marginalized voices and create spaces where people like him could feel seen and heard. His confidence, intelligence, and passion for social work set him apart. He had completed his undergraduate degree early and was working toward his master's in social work at the University of Mississippi. Jay was not only ambitious, but also deeply loved by those around him. He was incredibly close to his mother, Stephanie Lee, calling her multiple times a day just to check in. His friends described him as someone who could light up any room with his infectious energy and charisma.
He's real sweet. He don't bother anybody. He's real energetic, like real nice, friendly. He'll talk to anybody. He's kind of the life of the party. Like, he's real sweet. So it's just unfortunate like something like this is happening.
He was known for his bold fashion, unapologetic personality, and deep sense of community. But behind his vibrant life, there were secrets. Secrets that, unknown to him, would put him in grave danger. When Jay missed his usual daily check-ins with his mother, it was an immediate cause for concern. At first, Stephanie assumed he was simply busy, but as the hours passed with no response, a gnawing sense of dread set in. Jay was active on social media until around 6 in the morning, but then, suddenly, all activity stopped. He had never gone this long without reaching out, especially not to his mother. Even more alarming, his beloved Pomeranian, Lexus, was still in his apartment. Jay never went anywhere without his dog, and the fact that he had left her behind only deepened the concern. As the day wore on, panic gripped those who knew him best. His friends called him repeatedly, but there was no answer. His mother sent text after text, but nothing came back. Calls to his phone went straight to voicemail. Then came the first major clue. Jay's car, a distinctive black Ford Fusion with a gold racing stripe, was found abandoned at the Mollybar Trails apartment complex, located just half a mile from his home. Investigators combed through the vehicle, discovering his bank cards and keyring still inside. But his phone was missing. More disturbingly, there was no sign of Jay. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. From the moment Jay Lee was reported missing, investigators faced a troubling lack of physical evidence. There was no sign of forced entry at his apartment, no reports of a struggle, and no clear leads. His abandoned car at the Mollybar Trails apartment complex gave them a starting point, but it was what they found in his digital footprint that would lead them to a suspect. Authorities first obtained surveillance footage from Jay's apartment complex, Campus Walk. The footage showed him leaving his unit at 5:58 a.m. on July 8, 2022. He was wearing a silver robe, gold cap, and gray slippers, clothing that suggested he was stepping out briefly, not planning to be gone for long. The footage did not show anyone else entering or exiting his apartment around that time. However, what concerned investigators most was that Jay had taken nothing with him. Not his phone, not his wallet, not even his dog, Lexus. This was completely out of character for him. Investigators then turned to Jay's phone records and social media activity. They quickly realized that his iPhone was missing, making it impossible to track him using GPS. However, Jay's iCloud account contained something more valuable: his recent messages and online activity. When detectives reviewed his last known conversations, they discovered something deeply unsettling. Just before Jay disappeared, he had been messaging someone on Snapchat, an account with the username redeye24. The conversation, which began at 5:17 a.m. and continued until 6:03 a.m., raised immediate red flags. Jay seemed wary and hesitant about meeting this person. At one point, he even accused them of trying to lure him into a dangerous situation, sending a message that read, "Yeah, now it seems like you're just trying to lure me over there to beat my ass or something." The other person reassured him, claiming he had nothing to worry about. Eventually, Jay seemed convinced and changed his mind about meeting up. His final message, sent at 6:03 a.m., was chilling in its simplicity. "Open it." After that, his phone went completely silent. Investigators knew that Snapchat messages disappear after they are read, making it difficult to retrieve additional details from their conversation. However, they were able to trace the email associated with the redeye24 account. The email belonged to a University of Mississippi graduate named Timothy Harrington Jr. When police dug deeper into Timothy's internet history, they found something even more chilling. Just minutes before Jay arrived at his apartment, Timothy had searched online. How long does it take to strangle someone?
You will see how the police traced Jay to that apartment. You will see that when Jay gets there, he lets Timothy know he's there. But right before Jay gets to his apartment, when he's headed over, right before he gets there, just mere minutes, Timothy searches How long does it take to strangle someone? The evidence will further show that Jay never left that apartment on his own.
This wasn't just a random curiosity. The timing suggested it was premeditated. Investigators now had strong reason to believe that Timothy had lured Jay to his apartment under false pretenses, knowing exactly what he planned to do. But the digital evidence wasn't all they had. Authorities began tracking Timothy's movements on July 8th, and what they found painted an even darker picture. At 7:30 a.m., just 90 minutes after Jay was last seen, his car was caught on the surveillance footage leaving Timothy's apartment complex. However, the driver was not clearly visible. Timothy denied driving it, but investigators weren't convinced. At 8 a.m., Timothy was captured on Walmart security footage. He was seen walking through the store, examining large trash bins before purchasing a roll of duct tape. On its own, this purchase may not have raised suspicions, but given the context of the case, it was an ominous sign. By 10 a.m., Timothy had switched vehicles, picking up a box truck he used for his moving business. He then drove to his parents' house in Grenada, where he retrieved a shovel and a wheelbarrow. Investigators believed he had used these tools to dispose of Jay's body. At 2 p.m., Timothy returned to the area. But this time, something was different. He was wearing different shoes than he had been in the morning. Surveillance footage captured him unloading the wheelbarrow at his parents' home. Another major piece of the puzzle was Jay's car. The black Ford Fusion, with its distinctive gold stripe, had been abandoned at Molly Bartrell's apartments, just half a mile from Timothy's apartment. When investigators reviewed security footage from the entrance of the complex, Jay's car was seen arriving at 7:25 a.m. 9 minutes later, at 7:34 a.m., a man in black shorts and a gray hoodie was seen jogging away from the parking lot. Investigators believed this was Timothy Harrington. Inside Jay's car, police found his credit and debit cards, key ring, and other personal belongings. The only thing missing was his phone. The car's interior revealed no signs of a struggle, but authorities were troubled by how it was parked. It was left haphazardly over a curb, with its front wheels turned sharply to the left, suggesting it had been parked in a hurry. When questioned about his whereabouts that morning, Timothy initially denied any recent contact with Jay. However, when confronted with the Snapchat messages, he changed his story. He admitted they had met that morning, but insisted that Jay had left on his own. With no clear signs of a struggle, no body, and no direct evidence, police had to build their case using digital records and circumstantial evidence. But Timothy's own inconsistent statements only made him look more guilty. During their second interview with him, Timothy amended his story again, now admitting that he and Jay had been sexually involved, but still maintaining that he had nothing to do with Jay's disappearance. His sudden willingness to acknowledge their relationship raised further questions. Was he afraid that Jay would expose the truth? Had the fear of being outed driven him to murder? The most damning evidence, however, was his web searches. Beyond the search about strangulation, Timothy had searched for news updates on Jay's disappearance before it was even widely reported. On July 10th, just 2 days after Jay vanished, Timothy Googled Molly Bar Apartments, the same location where Jay's car was later found. At the time of his search, police had not publicly disclosed this detail. How did Timothy know? By July 11th, Timothy was repeatedly searching for updates on Oxford MS Police, Find Jimmy Lee, and missing University of Mississippi student. His obsessive interest in the case was not the behavior of an innocent man. With all the evidence at hand, investigators formed a timeline of what they believed had happened. They theorized that Timothy had lured Jay to his apartment that morning under false pretenses, possibly promising to make up for an earlier argument. Once Jay arrived, something went terribly wrong. Whether it was a heated argument, a moment of panic, or a premeditated attack, Timothy acted violently. The strangulation search suggested that Jay had been killed in Timothy's apartment. The duct tape purchase, the change in vehicles, and the retrieval of a shovel pointed to a plan to dispose of the body. The abandoned car at Molly Bar Apartments seemed like a calculated move to throw off investigators. While authorities still lacked a body, they believed they had enough evidence to charge Timothy. After obtaining a search warrant for his apartment, investigators used cadaver dogs inside the unit. The dogs alerted to certain areas, suggesting possible human remains had been there at some point. On July 22, 2022, Timothy Harrington was arrested and charged with murder. But without a body, would the case hold up in court? The lack of physical evidence made it difficult for prosecutors to prove exactly how Jay had died. With only circumstantial evidence in digital footprints, the case hinged on whether a jury would convict without a body. What happened next? A shocking mistrial, a controversial decision, and 2 years later, a breakthrough that changed everything. On the surface, Timothy Harrington Jr. seemed like the last person anyone would suspect of being involved in something so sinister. He came from a prominent, well-respected family with deep ties to the local community. His grandfather was a pastor, and he had built a reputation as a polite and well-mannered young man. After graduating from the University of Mississippi, he had started a moving business with a friend and appeared to be on a steady path toward success. But behind closed doors, Timothy was living a double life. He and Jay had been involved in a secret romantic relationship, something Timothy had worked desperately to keep hidden. Unlike Jay, who was proud of his identity, Timothy was terrified of being exposed. He was deeply closeted, fearful of how his family and community would react if they learned the truth. Investigators began to wonder, had Jay threatened to reveal their relationship? Had Timothy lured him to his apartment, desperate to keep his secret safe at any cost? The mounting evidence suggested one chilling conclusion: yes. As investigators dug deeper, a pattern of suspicious behavior emerged. Surveillance footage, phone records, and witness accounts painted a damning picture of what had happened on the morning Jay disappeared. At 6 a.m., Jay arrived at Timothy's apartment. By 7:30 a.m., Jay's car was seen leaving the complex, but the driver was not clearly visible. Timothy, however, denied any involvement. At 8 a.m., security cameras captured him at a local Walmart, browsing through large garbage bins before purchasing a roll of duct tape. Later that day, Timothy switched vehicles and drove to his parents' home in Grenada. There, he retrieved a shovel and a wheelbarrow. Authorities believed he had used them to dispose of Jay's body. At 2 p.m., he returned to the area, this time wearing different shoes. Every move he made raised more questions. Investigators were convinced they had their man, and with this mountain of circumstantial evidence, Timothy was arrested and charged with murder. But the prosecution had one major obstacle: there was no body. When the trial of Timothy Harrington Jr. began, it immediately became one of the most controversial and closely watched cases in Oxford, Mississippi. Prosecutors faced a daunting challenge. They had no body, no murder weapon, and no direct forensic evidence tying Timothy to Jay's disappearance.
There's no weapon, there is no blood. How do we know there's been a murder committed? There's nobody, there's no gunshots heard. I mean, nobody has seen a struggle or heard of a struggle. So how do we know that someone is dead? And how do they know that Timothy Harrington did it?
What they did have was a mountain of circumstantial evidence, suspicious behavior, and a damning digital trail. The prosecution's case rested on several key arguments. They argued that Timothy had a clear motive: his fear of being outed. Jay was openly gay, while Timothy had spent his life hiding his sexuality from family and friends. They presented evidence that suggested Jay had threatened to expose their relationship, potentially leading to Timothy's rage-fueled attack. The jury was shown Snapchat messages from the morning Jay disappeared, in which Jay appeared hesitant about meeting Timothy, but ultimately agreed. The last message Jay ever sent, "Open it," was displayed in court, followed by the eerie silence that came after. Prosecutors laid out Timothy's suspicious movements on July 8th, highlighting his Google search, "How long does it take to strangle someone?" made just before Jay arrived at his apartment. They showed surveillance footage of Timothy at Walmart purchasing duct tape, his abandoned car switch, and the retrieval of a shovel and wheelbarrow from his parents' home. They argued that Timothy had planned to dispose of Jay's body, which explained why it had never been found. The most chilling evidence was Timothy's own internet search history. In the days following Jay's disappearance, Timothy had repeatedly Googled phrases such as "Find Jimmy Lee," "Molly Bar Apartments Police," and "Oxford MS Missing Person." What made these searches damning was that police had not yet disclosed that Jay's car was found at Molly Bar Apartments, meaning Timothy knew a detail about the case that he should have had no way of knowing. The prosecution also called cadaver dog handlers to the stand. They testified that dogs had alerted to human decomposition inside Timothy's apartment, particularly in the bedroom and near a closet. While this was not definitive proof of murder, it suggested that Jay's body had been inside Timothy's apartment at some point. The prosecution closed their argument with a haunting statement. If Jay Lee was still alive, he would have reached out to his mother, he would have checked in with his friends, he would not have abandoned his dog, his car, his life. He is dead, and the only person responsible is sitting in this courtroom. Timothy Harrington's defense team focused on one crucial weakness in the prosecution's case. There was no body. Without a body, they argued, the state could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Jay had been murdered at all. The defense painted an alternate theory. Jay had a history of late-night meetups and could have left Timothy's apartment alive that morning.
Police conduct prior to this night and the manner in which he conducted himself. I'm not passing judgment on the young man. Those are facts. Things that occurred in his life, it was not unusual for him to be going out in the middle of the night. I think evidence is going to show. I didn't make these things up.
They suggested that Jay had willingly gone to meet someone else, someone who could have harmed him. They pointed out that there were no witnesses who saw Timothy harming Jay and that no DNA, blood, or physical evidence had been found tying Timothy to a murder.
Blood, urine, trace evidence whatsoever. They don't have one scintilla that means anything in legal terms. First of all, that a death occurred in Lafayette County if it did occur. Second of all, any trace evidence in his apartment, zero. I'm not saying speculatively, it is their proof that a crime was ever committed inside our client's apartment, or in the parking lot, or in his car, or in Jamie's car. Nowhere.
They also attempted to explain away the suspicious search history, claiming that Timothy had been curious about missing person cases and strangulation out of fear, not guilt. They suggested that the Google searches about Jay's disappearance were simply those of an innocent man following a case that involved someone he knew. In an effort to dismantle the prosecution's timeline, they argued that Jay's car leaving the apartment complex at 7:30 a.m. did not prove Timothy was driving it. They claimed that another unknown individual could have taken Jay's car and abandoned it at Molly Bar Apartments. One of the most controversial moments in the trial came when Timothy's attorneys accused Jay of leading a reckless lifestyle, implying that he could have met someone dangerous outside of his relationship with Timothy. The insinuation was widely criticized as an attempt to discredit Jay and shift blame away from their client. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for several days. While the prosecution had presented a strong circumstantial case, the lack of a body left just enough room for doubt. The jurors reviewed the digital evidence, rewatched surveillance footage, and discussed whether the case met the threshold of beyond a reasonable doubt. When the final vote was cast, the jury stood at 11-1 in favor of conviction. But because one juror refused to convict without a body, a mistrial was declared. The courtroom fell silent as the decision was announced. Jay's family, who had sat through the entire trial reliving their worst nightmare, was devastated. Timothy, who had spent the trial stone-faced and silent, was led out of the courtroom, knowing he had narrowly escaped a murder conviction. With the mistrial, Timothy Harrington was released from custody, walking out of the courtroom a free man. But for Jay's family, the fight was far from over. They vowed to seek justice, refusing to let their son's case fade away. Stephanie Lee, Jay's mother, took to social media writing, "We will not stop until justice is served. My son's life mattered." The case continued to make headlines, sparking national conversations about the challenges of prosecuting murder cases without a body. Many legal experts debated whether prosecutors should have pursued a murder conviction or a lesser charge that could have secured a conviction. For months, the Oxford community lived with the unsettling reality that Timothy Harrington had walked free, despite overwhelming circumstantial evidence against him. But everything changed in February 2025, when a breakthrough shattered the defense's main argument and left no room for doubt. On February 3, 2025, nearly 2.5 years after Jay vanished, a group of deer hunters in Carroll County stumbled upon human remains at an illegal dumping site. The remains were badly decomposed, but enough forensic evidence remained to make a positive identification. 2 days later, authorities confirmed the worst. The remains belonged to Jimmy J. Lee. With the discovery of Jay's body, the entire case was reignited. Prosecutors wasted no time in re-indicting Timothy Harrington, this time charging him with capital murder and tampering with evidence. The lack of a body had been the greatest weakness in the first trial, but now that problem was gone. The second trial, a case stronger than ever. With the discovery of Jay's remains, prosecutors now had the strongest case yet against Timothy. Forensic analysis determined that Jay's body showed signs of strangulation, directly confirming what investigators had suspected all along. The second trial would not hinge on circumstantial evidence alone. It would be supported by physical proof of Jay's death. Now the stakes were higher than ever. This time, prosecutors were considering the death penalty. Jay Lee had been a young man full of life, love, and ambition, and someone had taken that away from him. The first trial may have failed to bring justice, but with his body finally found, there would be no more loopholes, no more doubt, and no more hiding behind a lack of evidence. As Timothy Harrington awaited his second trial, the question remained: would justice finally be served? For over 2 years, Jay's family lived in agony, holding on to hope but fearing the worst. Then, in February 2025, a breakthrough changed everything. A group of deer hunters in Carroll County, about an hour and a half from Oxford, stumbled upon human remains at an illegal dumping site. Investigators were called in, and 2 days later, forensic analysis confirmed the devastating news. Jay had finally been found. His body had been hidden for over 2 years, but now the search was over. With this discovery, prosecutors re-indicted Timothy Harrington for capital murder, this time with an additional charge of tampering with evidence. The lack of a body had been the defense's greatest advantage in the first trial. Now, that advantage was gone. Jay Lee was more than a victim of a crime. He was a young man full of promise, passion, and love. He had dedicated his life to helping others, but someone else's fear, shame, and desperation to keep a secret had cost him his life. Timothy Harrington had walked free once, but with new charges filed and Jay's remains discovered, the fight for justice was far from over. As the second trial looms, the stakes are higher than ever. This time, prosecutors are considering seeking the death penalty. With undeniable proof that Jay was murdered, the question remains: will justice finally be served?